Okay? Pour your tea, get comfortable, and do not judge me because today I am going to tell you about my adventures in online dating. And I use the word adventures very loosely. The way you might describe a plumbing emergency as an adventure. Technically, something happened. It was certainly eventful. Nobody would call it fun. And by the end of it, you were just grateful to be standing on dry ground. And I want to say before I begin that I know, dating after 50 is brave. Dating after 50 is putting yourself out there. Dating after 50 is a bold and courageous act of hope in the face of everything life has already shown you. I know all of that. I believe all of that. And also, the specific experience of navigating online dating as a woman over 50 is something that needs to be talked about openly and honestly and with a significant quantity of tea and dark humor because nobody tells you what it is actually like. Nobody gives you the real briefing, and the real briefing is that it is a whole operating system that nobody gave you the manual for. And the bugs, my darling, the bugs are not cute. So let me tell you how it started. Let me take you back to the evening I downloaded my first dating app, which I did with the energy of someone who has made a decision and is committing to it before they can talk themselves out of it. It was a Tuesday evening. I was on my sofa. I had a glass of wine. I had my phone. I had the quiet determination of a woman who has decided that she is not done, that there is more life to be lived and more connection to be found, and that sitting on this sofa alone on Tuesday evenings for the rest of her life is simply not the plan. And so I downloaded the app and I set up my profile and I chose my photos with enormous care. Not the ones from 10 years ago that I look incredible in, but that constitute a form of false advertising. The real ones, recent ones, honest ones, photos of an actual woman in her actual 50s who looks like herself and is not pretending otherwise. And I wrote a bio that I was genuinely proud of, funny and warm and specific, the kind of bio that tells you something real about a person. And then I pressed the button and I entered the arena. And within the first 20 minutes, I had received a message that said, and I am quoting directly here, "Hey, beautiful," all lowercase, no punctuation, just those two words floating there in the chat, like they had fallen off a sentence that couldn't be bothered to finish itself. And I looked at it for a moment. I really looked at it. And I thought about everything those two words communicated. The complete absence of effort. The assumption that, "Hey, beautiful" was sufficient. That it would be received as charming rather than as what it actually was, which was the digital equivalent of someone driving past and honking their horn, and I did not respond. I simply moved on, and I want to say that was the last time something like that happened, but I would be lying to you, and we don't do that in here. That was not the last time. That was, in fact, just the opening act of a very long show, because the world of online dating is populated, I discovered, by a fascinating variety of men who have very different ideas about what constitutes an introduction. There was the man whose entire profile was a photograph of a fish he had caught. Just the fish. No other photos, no bio, just him and the fish, and apparently that was the pitch. That was the whole offering, take it or leave it. And I left it. There was the man who opened with a paragraph about his ex-wife that was so detailed and so laden with unresolved feelings that I felt I needed to refer him to a therapist rather than agree to coffee. There was the man who, after approximately 4 messages, asked me what I was wearing. There was the man who seemed perfectly lovely through several exchanges and then revealed in a completely casual way that he was separated, not divorced, separated, which is a very different thing. a very specific and complicated thing, and he said it like he was mentioning that he preferred tea to coffee. Just a small detail, not something that required any particular response. And I looked at that message for a long time before I very gently and very clearly said, I don't think this is the right timing for either of us. And he sent back a thumbs up emoji, which honestly told me everything I needed to know. And I want to talk about the emoji situation for a moment because it is its own entire category of confusion. Because when you are a woman of a certain age and you receive a thumbs up in response to something you said with sincerity and care, you do not know what to do with that. The thumbs up exists somewhere between acknowledgement and dismissal, and you cannot tell which one it is, and you spend more time than you should trying to decode the emotional content of a small yellow hand, and that is not how you want to be spending your Wednesday afternoon. And then there is the ghosting, which is a thing I had heard about but did not fully believe was as widespread as people said until it happened to me twice, because ghosting sounds like something young people do. It sounds like a thing that belongs to a different generation, and then you are 3 weeks into what felt like a genuinely promising exchange, real conversations, actual depth, the kind of back and forth that makes you think maybe, just maybe, and then nothing. The messages just stop. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. Just a person who was there and then simply wasn't. And you sit with that silence and you try not to take it personally. And you mostly succeed except for the part where you lie awake at 2 a.m, running through the last thing you said, wondering if that was it, if that was the thing. And then you tell yourself firmly that a person who ghosts you after 3 weeks of conversation has done you an enormous favor because they have shown you something important about themselves, and you have lost nothing of value, and you believe that, you genuinely believe it, and then you pick yourself up and you go back to the app because you are not done. You decided you are not done, and you are sticking to that decision. And I want to tell you about the first date, because there was a first date. There was a man who seemed normal, who wrote in complete sentences with punctuation, which I had by that point come to regard as a significant green flag, who had a sense of humor that translated across text, which is harder than it sounds. And we agreed to meet for coffee on a Saturday morning at a cafe that was public and well lit, and that I had chosen specifically because I knew where the exit was, which is just practical and also slightly funny as a sentence, and I am choosing to own it. And I got ready with the specific anxiety of a woman who has not been on a first date in a very long time. The outfit changed 3 times. The hair was reconsidered twice. I had a conversation with my reflection that was part pep talk and part negotiation. And I drove to the cafe and I walked in, and he was already there, and he looked like his photos, which felt like a miracle and also a relief. And we had coffee and we talked for 2 hours, and it was actually genuinely, surprisingly nice. It was just nice. 2 adults having a real conversation. And when we said goodbye, he said he'd like to do it again. And I said yes. And I drove home and I sat in the car outside my house for a few minutes, just feeling something that I realized after a moment was hope, just ordinary, quiet hope. And I want to tell you what I have learned from all of it, from the hey beautifuls and the fish photos and the ghosting and the emojis and the one genuinely nice Saturday morning coffee, because there are things I know now that I did not know when I downloaded that app on a Tuesday evening with my wine and my determination. And the first thing is that your standards are not too high. Let me say that again, because I think some of us have been told this or have told ourselves this, and it needs to be addressed directly. Your standards are not too high. Your standards are the product of everything you have learned and survived and grown through, and they are completely appropriate for the woman you are now. A woman who knows herself, who knows what she needs, who has been through enough to understand the difference between something real and something that is just filling space. And you do not need to lower them to be grateful for the attention. Attention is not the goal. Connection is the goal. Real, honest, mutual connection, and anything less than that is not a compromise worth making. And the second thing is that dating after 50, for all its particular frustrations and absurdities, is also an act of extraordinary courage that most people will not fully appreciate unless they have done it. Because you are putting yourself out there with full knowledge, with eyes wide open, without the naivety that cushions the experience when you are younger and believe that love is simply a matter of finding the right person at the right time. You know now that it is more complicated than that. You know what loss feels like. You know what it costs to open yourself up, and you are doing it anyway, and that is not desperate or sad or any of the things that the world sometimes implies about women of a certain age who are still interested in love. That is brave. That is a radical insistence that your story is not finished, that there are still chapters to be written, that you are worth loving and you know it, and you are not going to settle for a fish photo and a hey beautiful when you know that. And the third thing, the thing I want to leave you with today is this: whether you are on the apps or you are not on the apps, whether you are dating or you are happily and completely done with the whole enterprise, whether you are healing from something or hoping for something or just quietly content in your own company, you are not too old, you are not too much, you are not too complicated or too independent or too aware of what you need. You are exactly right. You are a whole person who deserves whole love. And if the apps have taught me anything, it is that I know exactly who I am and exactly what I will and will not accept. And I would rather sit on my sofa with my tea and my own good company than spend one more minute decoding a thumbs up emoji from someone who can't be bothered to use his words. And honestly, that clarity, that specific hard-won clarity, might be the best thing online dating ever gave me. So here is to knowing your worth. Here is to complete sentences and actual punctuation. Here is to the brave and slightly ridiculous act of still believing in connection. Now go pour yourself another cup. You have absolutely earned it.